You picture it. Year 2026, rural Ontario, 40 acres, a wood stove, solar on the roof, nobody telling you what to do. You buy the land, clear a pad, frame a small cabin. Then a white pickup rolls up with building inspector on the door and a clipboard heavier than your entire tool bag. He's quoting the Ontario Building Code, SB 12 and Section 9.36 on energy efficiency, talking about conformance pathways and authorized professionals. You just wanted a roof that doesn't leak. Now he's explaining you can't legally occupy your own cabin without a certificate of occupancy, stamped drawings, engineered septic, and a hydro hookup for safety. The bylaw he waves calls your dream non-conforming development. Translation: tear it down or pay until you quit. Tonight, we're going through 5 Canadian provinces quietly making off-grid living almost impossible. You start in your head, not on paper. It's 2026. Your doom-scrolling homestead channels and real estate listings, hidden valley, unorganized township, no neighbors for miles. The fantasy is simple. Buy land, drill a well, drop some panels, disappear. I walk you through the mental movie: British Columbia mountains, Ontario bush lots, prairie quarter sections. You imagine no landlord, no city bylaws, no condo board. Land is freedom, right? Here's the first crack nobody shows you in those YouTube tours. By 2012, every province had tied its building rules into the National Building Code or a provincial equivalent. Those PDFs are already waiting for you, and they don't care about your solar panels or your composting toilet. The British Columbia Energy Step Code promises net zero ready new construction by 2032. Sounds green. What it actually means: if you ever want a legal dwelling, you're already inside their framework whether you knew it or not. You think you're escaping the system, you're actually walking straight into its paperwork. Now we zoom into northern Ontario around 2019, where off-grid forums rave about unorganized townships as freedom zones. No local building department, minimal zoning, do what you want. Sounds perfect. Here's what they don't mention. Even in unorganized territory, structures still have to meet the Ontario Building Code if you ever want insurance, financing, or to sell. And many of those unorganized areas are getting folded into municipalities as property values rise and tax assessors notice all those new roof lines on satellite imagery. A couple near Timmins bought in an unorganized area in 2016, built a solar-powered cabin, lived quietly for 3 years. Then the surrounding region was reorganized into a new township. Suddenly, they're getting letters demanding as-built plans, septic approvals under OREGI 332/12, and proof their footing depth matched frost-line requirements. Their quiet cabin is now classified as an illegal structure on paper. If the map can change under you, so can your freedom. And the map always serves the tax base, not the homesteader. We tackle the foundational belief: you own land, therefore you own your choices. You think you control the well, the power, the waste, the shelter. Match each one with regulatory reality: provincial water regulations, on-site sewage codes under bodies like the Ministry of Environment, electrical safety authorities that don't answer to you. Alberta, around 2020, rural counties brand themselves as open for business. A farmer outside Red Deer converts an old shop into an off-grid tiny home for his daughter. No formal complaints, no neighbors upset. Just a quiet family arrangement. Then an assessor doing a property drive-by for taxation spots a chimney that wasn't on last year's roll. That triggers a file note, which triggers a safety codes inspection. Suddenly, Alberta's Safety Codes Act and the National Plumbing Code are on the table, with minimum fixture counts and mechanical ventilation requirements that a simple wood-heated compost toilet tiny home doesn't meet. The first illusion to die is that private property means private decisions. The state disagrees, on paper, and it brought receipts. We start the provincial countdown with Ontario because it sells itself as a mix of rural freedom and world-class standards. The Ontario Building Code's Energy Section, SB 12 and Division B, Part 9, assumes subdivisions, grid-tied furnaces, and engineered HVAC. To build legally, you either follow prescriptive tables designed for conventional homes or pay a designer to model your alternative approach. A family in Haliburton in 2021 applies for a modest off-grid home. No furnace, just a wood stove and high-efficiency envelope, solar for electricity. The Township Building Department says fine if they hire a BCIN-certified designer and supply stamped energy calculations proving compliance with requirements intended for much larger grid-tied suburban houses. The design work alone quotes at $6,000. Permits and inspections add another $7,000. Their land cost $30,000. Translation: you can be energy independent so long as you have enough cash to pay the gatekeepers who certify your independence. And if you think Ontario's love of consultants is bad, watch what British Columbia does with climate leadership. British Columbia markets itself as the promised land of eco-living. The BC Energy Step Code, introduced around 2017 and ramped up through 2022, pushes new buildings toward net zero-ready performance. On paper, that sounds like off-grid heaven. In reality, municipalities adopt Step 3 or higher, which often requires blower door tests, mechanical ventilation systems, and site inspections that few DIY builders can afford or access. In the Kootenays, a retired couple tries to permit a small straw bale house with solar and a gravity-fed water system. The regional district tells them they must meet Step 3, including air tightness targets only practically achievable with professional crews and specialized materials. A blower door test alone runs $800, the travel surcharge to their remote site another $400. And that's just one test. Their dream of a low-cost, low-tech house is reclassified as non-compliant alternative construction. Translation: they don't ban off-grid. They just raise the bar until you can't reach it without industrial tools and professional fees you never budgeted for. Ontario buries you in forms. BC smiles, says climate justice, and hands you a bill. Alberta takes a different route. It weaponizes safety. Alberta likes to sell the image of rugged independence, but since the early 2000s, the Safety Codes Act has centralized building, plumbing, gas, and electrical permitting under accredited agencies that cover even the most remote areas. Even far from Edmonton or Calgary, you're still under a framework that expects every dwelling to be inspected by certified officers. No permit, no inspection, no inspection, no legal occupancy. No legal occupancy, no insurance, no financing, no resale. A welder near Grande Prairie builds a self-contained shop house on his quarter section in 2018. Solar, a well, a composting toilet. No grid connection, no natural gas. When he applies for rural address signage so he can receive mail, the county triggers a review and discovers no building or electrical permits were ever issued. He's served with an order, obtain permits and open up finished walls for inspection, or face fines and potential condemnation under the Safety Codes Act. Translation: you can build with your own hands. They still own the definition of safe, and they can unbuild your house on paper whenever they notice you exist. Alberta pulls you back in with safety. Quebec does it with language and bureaucracy, aggressively. Quebec's building environment is governed by the Code de Construction du Québec and a dense web of municipal bylaws. If you think you'll just file your plans in English and go live in the Laurentian woods, think again. Around 2015, a couple near Saint-Sauveur tries to register an off-grid chalet. The municipality demands plans stamped by a member of the Ordre des Architectes du Québec, septic design certified by an engineer, and full conformité with provincial standards for drinking water systems. Their composting toilet, grey water irrigation, and hand-dug well, all carefully designed using proven methods, are treated as systèmes non reconnus, unrecognized systems. To be legal, they must install an approved septic tank and leaching field at a cost higher than the cabin itself. Add to that the requirement that all legal submissions be in French, and every appeal, expert report, and code reference adds translation costs and delay for Anglophone applicants. Translation: they don't say no off-grid, they just say no to anything not already on their approved list, and the list was written for subdivisions. Ontario uses consultants, BC uses climate, Alberta uses safety, Quebec uses conformity. Out east, Nova Scotia plays the quiet long game with water and waste. Nova Scotia's rural ads show cheap land, rugged coasts, and fishing villages. Perfect retreat territory, right? Then you meet the on-site sewage disposal regulations under the Environment Act and the well drilling requirements that apply even to the most remote properties. In 2020, a family buys a few forested acres outside Lunenburg to build a tiny off-grid home. They plan a composting toilet and greywater garden, systems that produce no blackwater and minimal environmental impact. The local inspector informs them that for a dwelling to be legally occupied, it needs an approved on-site sewage system designed and installed by a certified installer, even if they're not flushing anything into the ground. Cost estimate for the approved system, $15,000 to $20,000. Their drilled well must be done by a licensed contractor and tested per provincial standards before any occupancy sign-off. Add permit fees, design charges, and HST. Suddenly, their $60,000 total budget is obliterated before the foundation is poured. Translation: you can collect rain, compost waste, and use a bucket if you like, but the province bills you as if you installed a suburban subdivision system anyway. 5 provinces, 5 styles of control. Now let's follow what actually happens to people who try to push through. A woman in rural Manitoba in 2019 builds a modest off-grid solar home. Panels, batteries, a backup generator, technically solid documented capacity, no safety issues. She's done her homework. She applies for a final occupancy permit. The local authority points her to the Manitoba Building Code and Electrical Code, which don't explicitly ban off-grid systems. But her inspector insists on assured continuous power for heating during winter months. In practice, that translates to a demand for a Manitoba hydro connection, despite her documented system capacity and load calculations. She offers system specs, an electrician's letter, winter performance projections. The file stalls. Months drag on while she lives in a half-legal house, unable to refinance or properly insure it. The official phrase in the letter she eventually receives, connection to a public utility is required to ensure life safety in extreme temperatures. Translation: your carefully designed system doesn't count as real power unless it pays a monthly bill to the Crown Corporation. Your engineering doesn't matter if it doesn't generate revenue for the utility. And if they can ignore your engineering, what happens when they decide your whole house doesn't exist on paper? A couple in Saskatchewan circa 2018. They build a small, off-grid cabin on family land near Prince Albert, intending it as a full-time residence. No permit. They believed rural RM bylaws didn't require one for small structures under a certain size. A neighbor complains about people living in an unapproved building. The rural municipality checks aerial imagery, confirms a new structure, and sends an officer. Under the Saskatchewan Public Health Act and RM building bylaw, they classify it as an unapproved dwelling without potable water certification or approved sewage disposal. The order they receive: cease occupancy until the building meets National Building Code standards and an approved water and sewage system is installed. There's a fine schedule for non-compliance that escalates into thousands of dollars. They can keep the cabin as a seasonal recreational structure. They technically don't sleep in more than a few weeks per year, but the moment they admit full-time use, they're in violation. Translation: they'll let you own a toy, not a life. Play cabin is fine. Real independence triggers enforcement. By now, you're probably thinking, I'll just fight it in court. Good. Let's see how that actually plays out. We step into the courtroom reality. Here's the typical pattern drawn from real cases across Canada. A homeowner challenges a stop work order or occupancy refusal. They believe they're right. They believe the law is on their side. They believe in due process. To fight, they need a lawyer versed in municipal and administrative law, $300 to $500 an hour in most provinces. They need expert reports, engineers to certify their alternative systems, planners to argue zoning interpretation, maybe environmental consultants. Each charges thousands. Meanwhile, interest on their land loan continues. Construction is frozen. The municipality's legal costs are covered by general tax revenue, meaning they can outlast you indefinitely. Real example: an Ontario owner who fought a township over a non-conforming septic solution spent over $40,000 in legal and expert fees across 2 years. The result? A costly compromise that still required installing most of what the township originally demanded. Left-leaning and right-leaning governments alike defend their codes with the same language: public safety, environmental protection, orderly development. Translation: you can technically fight City Hall, but the process is designed so that most people won't survive the financial bleed long enough to actually win. So if the fantasy of the court rescue is dead, what does that tell you about the system as a whole? Now we put the puzzle pieces on the table. Ontario's consultant maze, British Columbia's green performance codes that price out DIY builders, Alberta's safety centralization that reaches every quarter section, Quebec's conformity machine that rejects anything not pre-approved, Nova Scotia's water and waste requirements that assume subdivision infrastructure. Different politics, different branding, same result. Autonomous, low-cost off-grid homes are either forced into expensive subdivision-style compliance or pushed into permanent technical illegality where you live in fear of the next aerial survey or neighbor complaint. The incentives align perfectly. Utilities need ratepayers to justify infrastructure investments. Municipalities need property tax revenue and control over land use patterns. Provincial governments need to appear either green or safety conscious without actually shrinking the systems that employ their inspectors and generate their fees. A line from a real policy discussion paper about discouraging unregulated rural settlements hits different when you realize they're talking about one cabin in the woods occupied by a couple who just wanted to be left alone. Translation: this isn't a glitch in the system. This is the system working exactly as designed, coded into law, stamped into permits, enforced with inspections, and funded by people who can't afford to fight back. So where does that leave you, the person who just wanted a small, honest, independent life? We close by circling back to you at the start, scrolling listings, and dreaming about hidden Canadian regions perfect for off-grid life. After everything we've covered, I reframe that phrase. The regions aren't hidden on the map. They're hidden in the code, in rare zones where enforcement is lax, where bylaws haven't been updated yet, where inspectors are overworked or quietly sympathetic, where nobody's filed a complaint and the aerial surveys haven't caught up with the new construction. That's not freedom, that's borrowed time. And borrowed time runs out the moment someone notices. Here's your final image: a stack of building code binders next to a simple mason jar full of screws and nails on your workbench. Your sweat equity on one side, their paperwork on the other. Guess which one has legal standing in a courtroom? The last shot is your piece of land at sunset. Woods, water, quiet. Overlaid not with inspirational music, but with the faint rustle of pages being stamped somewhere in a provincial office you'll never visit but can't escape. You thought off-grid meant unplugging from the system. Now you know. The real grid isn't just electrical. It's legal, financial, and bureaucratic. It reaches all the way to your front door, and it was waiting for you before you ever signed the deed. The cabin you dreamed of building? It needs permission from people who will never live in it, never maintain it, and never care whether you succeed, only whether you comply. If you want more breakdowns of how this system actually works, and how some people still find cracks in it, you know what to do.